Video game preservation has been a hot topic in recent years because it's reasonably an area in the gaming industry worth concerning over. Many games have been lost to time for a plethora of reasons. They were digital exclusive and have been delisted. They required external peripherals in order to be played, which aren't easy to replicate or emulate. They simply haven't been re-released in any capacity. The list goes on, meaning as time marches forward, hundreds, if not thousands of games are simply gone. This directly correlates with one of the biggest reasons why I'm so thankful to be a Sega fan. They've made a great effort in providing many ways to experience their games that come from even their very first consoles. It's great to see and interesting to look back on, be it their combo packs, traditional collections, or digital lineups all under the same kind of series name. So interesting that I may or may not have been spending the past few months researching, buying, and playing all of them in order to make a comprehensive video looking back on each one in an effort to educate and inform you all on which ones I find to be the best. In a world full of 200 or so re-releases of Sonic 2, which ones are actually worth your time? Just which one of the many Genesis collections are worth indulging in today? Out of all of Sonic's specific collections, which ones do I recommend? And in regards to Sega's other individual series seeing re-releases of their own, which ones truly allow for the best entry points? Whether you really have these questions or not, I'm gonna answer them anyway, so you may as well stick around, right? Grab a snack and pick up your controller of choice, because we're gonna be here a while as I present to you all a comprehensive look at the history of Sega's collections. Just one disclaimer, despite the fact that this video isn't strictly informative, since I'll also be giving my opinions. It's worth noting that I'll be steering away from compilations to have a focus on titles for the console said compilation is releasing on, and no games within games. That's another topic altogether. No, we're having a focus on legacy collections specifically, and I say this because Sega's collections can technically be traced back to the Sega Genesis with its 3-in-1 combo packs. Nah, we're instead going to be starting with the Sega CD and its Sega Classic Arcade Collection. Now, instead of just 3 games in one, it's 5. Truly, this is the power of CD technology. Since you need a Genesis in order to play a Sega CD, technically this does bend the rules a bit right off the bat, but I don't know, I felt like this was a good starting point. And besides, even though this collection pulls from their Genesis renditions, Golden Axe, Columns, and Super Monaco GP all did technically originate as arcade games, hence the name. So screw you, I'm counting it. That being said, yes, they do derive from their Genesis versions, and Streets of Rage along with Revenge of Shinobi are straight up Genesis games, so I guess if you want to play them through the CD rather than the Genesis, you can do that, though I hesitate to call any of the included titles better versions, with Golden Axe being a straight downgrade in my book due to the exclusion of multiplayer. They are different though, even more so in the sound department. All of the speech samples in these games have been re-recorded for higher quality's sake, and while they sound cleaner, for those who are used to the original games, they may just throw you for a loop like they did for me. I've been playing Streets of Rage for years, and hearing any kind of different voices for these characters will always be the weirdest thing in the world for me. Music was ripped straight from the original versions except for Golden Axe though, since that was recorded right from the arcade board and even had new instrumentation for its first level, and Columns even has a new title theme. That all being said, since this 5-in-1 pack has seen no re-release for it, you'll either be playing this directly off a Sega CD or, like me, an emulator of some kind. At that point, you have what I believe to be better alternatives for all of the included games right there, so this is more of a novelty than anything else, nothing optimal. No, things get more interesting when we move on to the next console, the Sega Saturn, a console that has a lot of great options for compilation enthusiasts. For starters, we have the first appearance of the Blue Blur, someone you're gonna get used to seeing in this video. Sonic Jam was the first major compilation of his 16-bit titles, and to this day it's one of, if not the best. Sonic 1, 2, 3, and Knuckles all on one disc, with the latter two able to be played separately or together, as well as Knuckles and Sonic 2 and the Blue Sphere game. These have always been seen as the core trio of classic Sonic games, and I'm fine with there being no 3D Blast or Spinball, but CD was an unfortunate loss. And I see that here especially because the included games aren't ROMs, but ports of these titles, allowing for them to run as smooth as possible on the 2D powerhouse that was the Sega Saturn. The Genesis games weren't too bad with slowdown, but CD's original release was fairly infamous in that regard, so not only would the inclusion have been nice, but the upgrade would have been appreciated too. Ah well, maybe next time. These being proper ports, however, was the best decision they could have made because that very fact allows for new spins on these titles, meaning not only can you play these games as originally intended, but through a new normal mode that smooths out the difficulty curve with some smart level design alterations, and even an easy mode that cuts out a lot of levels and drastically decreases the game's run times. I'd say stick with normal mode if it's your first time. Easy mode's a bit overkill, but I could see this being a fun change of pace for people like me who played these games 500 million times. Gameplay tweaks aside, the games look really nice in the system, making this already a great way of playing these great games. But the real area Sonic Jam shines in is its wide selection of extras, all housed in a 3D overworld called Sonic World. The first time the series has ever hopped into this realm if we aren't counting something like Sonic R. Yeah, traditional 3D Sonic controls on the Saturn. That's kinda big considering how the system didn't have a mainline Sonic game. You're even able to do some quick missions here. It's small, but cool as hell. And the buildings all act as your museums in this collection, where you're able to look at official art, trailers, videos, so on and so forth. I love it when collections have stuff like this for you to look at, like an included game's manual or any promotional material surrounding it. After all, if these are meant to be time capsules of the included games, why not throw in some of the game's aspects outside of what may have been on the cartridge or CD? Not many collections include things like this anymore, surprisingly, so it's always nice to see and will always earn bonus points in my eyes. With all this in mind, Sonic Jam may just be the best collection for this era of the Blue Blur. It's got some omissions, sure, but the bonuses, extra features, new ways to play these games, and overall love poured into the experiences, if anything, fascinating as hell. It's a shame that it remains exclusive to the Saturn, because I'd be all over something like this, but alas, that console's just full of crap I want to play but never will, huh? For those who did have the system though, you had a plethora of ways to play classic titles on them through the Sega Ages series, the first of this naming moniker as a matter of fact. Well, I say those who own a Saturn got to play these re-releases, but I should be saying those who own a Saturn and live in Japan, because the vast majority of these are Japan exclusive. Outrun, Space Harrier, and Afterburner 2 would make the jump overseas in Sega Ages Volume 1, but contrary to the name, this was the only volume. From what I've seen, these are pretty good collections, so it's too bad only a handful made it out of Japan, especially the Phantasy Star collection. I've been falling in love with this series as of late, so seeing it get the respect it does in this compilation makes this new fan pretty damn happy. On top of the main quadrilogy all being here on one disc, there's a bunch of concept art to look at and even some of the commercials for these titles. Games released back in the 80s and 90s had the best ads, so you know I'm all over something like this being included. Sega Ages as a series meant to re-release legacy content will see a lot of ups and downs as we make our way through this video, so keep an ear out for them, it gets pretty interesting. But for its first rodeo, I'd say it was off to a great start. Wish I could say the same for the next console's major compilation, the Dreamcast Sega Smash Pack Volume 1. Again, even though it's called Volume 1, this is the only one, and after playing it for just over a minute, I can't say it's hard to see why. It starts on a high note with the title and main menu theme. It's this ethereal, techno kind of vibe that I absolutely love. So much so that when I first booted this thing up, the screen got dim because I was on the title screen for too long. Easily the best part of the collection as a whole. Don't think that's a good thing, but I tried to give credit where it was due. As for the library of games featured in the collection, it's fine. It's fine. There are only 12 games, 10 of which being from the Sega Genesis yet again, but the other two are pretty neat choices, Virtual Cop 2 and Sega Swirl. Unfortunately, I haven't played those games before, and I opted out of having this pack be my first exposure to them. Why? Well, I decided to start with Sonic 1 to test out this pack's emulation prowess, and oh boy, there's lots to unpack here. Audio aside for the time being, you may have noticed something looks off about the title screen, and that's because Sonic's peeking out a bit too much from behind the banner. This is a glitch that can happen in later re-releases that allow you to remove sprite limitations, and I believe that's on by default in this pack without you being able to turn it off, hence why this is how the title screen's gonna look in this version of the game every single time you boot it up. This was most likely done to remove slowdown upon too many sprites being on screen at once or lessen graphical glitches like flickering and whatnot, but as you can see, the end result wasn't ideal, and that aside, visually the games just look way too saturated and bright when compared to how they're supposed to be, but to be fair, many of you might not notice stuff like that. What you will notice, however, is what you'll be hearing from this collection. The Genesis sound trip has always been a tricky one, even today it's tough to get perfectly, and we arguably haven't even reached that point yet. But this? This is just awful and worse than previous re-releases. With those, the soundtracks and effects were all recorded right from a Genesis, but since this is one of the first times the games are being emulated rather than properly ported, it's no wonder everything sounds so bad. Sound effects are unrecognizable, and music is butchered to an unforgivable degree. I didn't think Ultra Beast could be worse, but hearing that already bad music here was nightmare-inducing. The real crime for me, however, was how the poor audio ruined the good soundtracks, like Sonic 1, Phantasy Star 2, and even Streets of Rage 2. Oh god. Truth be told, the music is so bad it makes me laugh on multiple occasions when playing, but nobody should have any of these games included in the collection be their first exposure to said titles. Just a genuinely bad collection. And would you believe me if I told you that this isn't the worst version of Sonic 1? Oh my god. Speaking of Sonic, I say it's high time for another collection of his. A good one, don't worry. Hell, I'd argue a great one. Hear the music, and you'll know exactly what it is. Sonic Mega Collection and Mega Collection Plus are excellent compilations for the Blue Blur. Many people grew up with these as they were their gateway into the series should they not have had the opportunity to grow up with Sega consoles, and I'm one of those people. Sonic Mega Collection Plus in particular was my collection, and I played the hell out of it, falling in love with classic Sonic and eventually even Sega as a whole. And I'd like to think that this is because the collection itself, or both collections for that matter, don't just house great games but put them all in honest-to-God great packages. The music being a big part of that, which applies to both games since they share a soundtrack. The title screen is uplifting and can get anyone excited to dive into this beloved character's legacy. The main menu beyond that calms down a bit so that you can focus on where you want to go. The options and manuals are all accompanied by chill music. But the song that plays when you're in the menu to select the game is surprisingly emotional. It should feel out of place, but it works perfectly in emphasizing the echoes of a time long gone, meaning those who grew up with these games and those playing them for the first time are all hit by a wave of nostalgia. It's absolutely brilliant, and if anything, brings across the idea that Sonic games more often than not hit hard when it comes to music. Continuing on with praising these collections' excellent features, there's a lot to look at here, from each game's manuals to concept art, and in Mega Collection Plus case, even the opening to Sonic Heroes. Yeah, okay, maybe this collection isn't that great. Mega Collection on the GameCube, however, was released a bit earlier than Mega Collection Plus, so that one was hyping up SA2 and SA2 rather than Heroes, but it also had a cute little video breezing through some of Sonic's past games. Its depth on the titles covered is about as deep as a kiddie pool, going no further than naming the games in question along with a single sentence description, with its description on Sonic Jam in particular just being wrong, but I thought it was fine. I just love Sonic, man. Hey look, even Sonic CD's opening and ending cutscenes are here. Surely this means it's included in the collection, right? A surprising addition, however, is how much respect it gives to the Archie comics. Yeah, remember these? They got a little weird somewhere down the line, but once Ian Flynn got on board, they featured some of the best storytelling the series has seen. And while the covers you can look at don't reach up to that point, this is one hell of an inclusion, no doubt. You can read the first few issues in full, as a matter of fact, with the following ones just showing off their cover art that range from being dope as hell to truly encapsulating how wild this comic was for a while. As for the games included in the collection, it's a pretty stellar lineup. In Mega Collection's case, you have Sonic 1, 2, 3, and Knuckles all included, with the latter two able to be played separately at first, but together as an unlockable. I'm all for allowing players to play the two games on their own or together, but having one option blocked by hidden means is a little strange to me, especially with these games' quite frankly ridiculous unlock criteria. But that being said, yes, there are in fact unlockable games, and two of them aren't even Sonic, which I actually really like. They're neat bonuses and probably were put in there to encourage Sonic fans to try out some of the company's other great titles. I know it got me to do just that. Again, I wish the unlock criteria was more lenient, purposeful, or both, but the fact that these are here at all is cool enough for me. That being said, from the get-go, you also have 3D Blast, Spinball, and Mean Bean Machine to round out Sonic's appearance on the Genesis as a whole for the first time on the same disc. And in Mega Collection Plus, the extra word stems from not only a few more comic covers as a result of this releasing 2 years after the original collection, but due to even more games being included. A few more non-Sonic games for good measure, but as for extra games featuring the titular character, attention is turned to the Game Gear with about half of that library thrown in here for good measure. Not sure why they didn't include the Master System versions, but these are titles that don't see many re-releases anymore, so they're valuable inclusions. Your mileage on how much you enjoy the games may vary, but I'm glad they're here. Still can't say the same for Sonic CD, however. That's so odd. Why aren't they including it? Ah, well, maybe next time. Great lineup overall, and along with the later collection adding in the ability to use save states in its games, you may be inclined to think of Mega Collection Plus as simply being the better option, but I have to disagree. I think both have their advantages, with Plus having more content overall, but Mega Collection on the GameCube, in my experience, has netted me far better resolution. While making this video, I developed the Sonic 2 test, in which to gain an understanding of how good these collections preserve these games' graphical prowess, I used Sonic 2 as a reference. It is one of the best games ever made, after all. After conducting the experiment, this is what it looks like in Mega Collection, and here's what it looks like in Mega Collection Plus. I'm playing both games through their respective emulators, both upscaled to 1080p on the same computer rig, so I want to say that the PS2's 480i resolution is to blame, but I'm not 100% confident in that claim. All I know is that my eyes are seeing one thing in a much more impressive light than the other, meaning that while I don't have any need to use either collection as my go-to method of playing these games, I'm more inclined to pick Mega Collection over Mega Collection Plus should I ever reach that desire. I'd also like to mention that in either collection, the sound is still off, and while that'll always be a compromise I'll have to make even in the best re-releases, I'd consider this to be slightly outside the range of my quality standards. You might not have as picky an eye or ear for these things as I do, so I highly encourage you all to come to your own conclusions in regards to these sorts of things, because visuals and slight audio discrepancies aside, these are fantastic collections of fantastic games. But for me, I'd still go with other options at my disposal, despite my love for Mega Collection Vanilla and Plus, along with the immense nostalgia I'll always hold for them. Sonic was on a roll at this time, coming in hot with yet another compilation relatively soon after the previous one, Sonic Gems Collection. This was the weird one, as the main titles included were, at the time, some of the more rare entries, those being Sonic R, Sonic the Fighters, and Sonic CD. Holy crap, we did it! The other half of the Game Gear titles not included last time are here too, but these three are the clear stars of the show, and I think they're all fire. Yes, all of them. I'm tired of the slander. Sonic R rules. Sonic the Fighters is fun too, and Sonic CD is fantastic. US soundtrack only though, so if that's a deal breaker, I don't know what to tell you. This is all we had for a while. The way the collection is presented is once again spot on too, with an arguably cleaner UI and just as good a soundtrack as before, with it being a lot more upbeat and hype, while dipping into the more chill side of the spectrum every now and then too. As for the games, the two 3D ones look great. Clean on a technical level, smooth frame rate, bold colors, and the respective resolutions are preserved to boot. It's pretty awesome. Sonic CD looks okay, though, a little bit soft for my eyes, and the audio quality is rough. It sounds like I'm listening to all of these sound effects hella filtered for whatever reason, and I don't know if this is because it's based off of the PC version or whatever, but it sounds pretty bad. It's kind of funny, but still bad. That being said, if I do find myself booting this collection up, it's for Fighters and R anyway, and for my money, they're both preserved in excellent condition. Along with some great extras like an extensive art and render gallery, manuals for all of the included games, and two unlockable bangers that branch out from just being Sonic, this, like the Mega Collections, is a compilation I can easily recommend to Sonic fans and those looking to get into some of the weirder titles. Play it for Sonic R if anything. I swear the game's good. While we were busy playing Sonic games, most of Sega's other titles were busy being re-released in Japan for the Sega Ages 2500 series, a lineup of games that could easily have a whole video themselves. While this series started off giving older games full-on remakes, it eventually transitioned into specific franchise collections for the later volumes, with said collections being helmed by M2, a Japanese company well-versed in re-releasing classic titles in excellent quality. You've probably played a collection developed by them without even realizing it. These guys are all over the place for good reason, as you'll soon see, with their contributions to the 2500 series being their first notable step in their relationship with Sega, at least within the scope of this video. Space Harrier, Monster World, the Gunstar Treasure Box, and the Phantasy Star Complete Collection are all notable, fantastic packs of the games they were meant to house. While the game selection UI is ridiculously bare bones, the quality at which these games are playable is, at this point in the video, the best it's ever gotten. With different resolution options toggleable at any given moment, these games can look downright jaw-dropping, showcasing just how talented M2 is at this sort of thing. But the best part? Despite these games collections being Japan exclusive, the included titles allow you to switch to the international versions, meaning if they got an English release, you can play them. The menus themselves aren't too hard to navigate, so it's no trouble at all to load these games up in a Japanese PS2 or emulator and switch on over to the English versions of all these titles. And bada boom, you'll have yourself some of, if not the best versions of these games. I'm not kidding. Take a look at the Phantasy Star collection in particular, because you can not only double the walking speed in all of these games, but even set them to be easy or very easy, which doesn't necessarily affect the actual difficulty, but rather multiplies the amount of money and experience gained after battle in order to respect your time a lot more. This is especially useful in something like Phantasy Star 2, which is pretty damn infamous for making players grind an unhealthy amount. This collection is actually how I'm playing it for the first time, so I think you can tell just by that alone that these collections are all incredible and worthy choices for first-timers. Along with the games themselves being in amazing condition, Phantasy Star's collection has 3 hidden titles that are the Japan-exclusive text adventures, meaning no English version sadly, and all of the showcased compilations have sound tests and galleries for every game included, the latter of which feature concept art, manual scans, and other cool illustrations. So for those wanting to get into any of these series or are already fans of them, these are must-haves. Do what you gotta do in order to get your hands on them, whether that be through making a Japanese PSN account and getting them that way, finding a Japanese PS2 and physical copies, or emulation. M2 was a genius addition to the lineup of developers responsible for making Sega's classic games more accessible, and if you aren't convinced already, just give them some time. It somehow gets better. So with all of that going down in Japan, you might be wondering what the rest of the world was getting. The answer to that is the Sega Genesis collection for the PS2 and PSP, developed by Digital Eclipse. 28 games in both versions, with each having 5 different games be unlockable after fulfilling specific challenges in various titles. Once again, unlockable titles and legacy packs like this are a win in my book, and this is no exception. If anything, it's even better than the likes of the previous Sonic collections, because there are actually more thought out prerequisites this time around besides open the game 69 times, which makes the process of getting everything much more reasonable. That being said, the unlockables go beyond more Genesis games, and just like including non-Sonic games in the Sonic collections, this only adds to the special feeling these additional titles already exuded. Going even further than more additions to the library of games, I like the unlockable interviews you can watch as well. They're pretty weirdly edited, cutting out the interviewer asking the questions, meaning there are some awkward moments of dead air, but I'm glad they're here. Some of them are pretty interesting, as the developers reminisce on how much game development has changed over the years. It's some fascinating stuff.
人が、ソニックだけではなくてテイルスとかナックルズとかいろんなゲームを楽しめてすごい、アクションゲームの、王様みたいなゲームだなと思ってたんです。That's some crazy timing. It may surprise you to hear this after all the praising I just did, but I'm actually not too jazzed on this collection overall for a few reasons. The quality ain't great, it's arguably one of the worst conditions thus far. The UI is pretty ugly too, and the collection has a lot of strange omissions. No Streets of Rage trilogy? I mean, these are Genesis staples, and I'm pretty sure I'm not alone in thinking this because every Genesis collection since has at least included one of them. I'm sure this collection was good at the time, but it wouldn't take long for it to be made completely obsolete by the same team behind this collection, as a matter of fact. But that's in the next generation of consoles, and during this one, the handheld side of things were getting their fair share of retro Sega love as well. The Genesis Collection's PSP version aside, there were a handful of notable GBA collections as well, all with their own sets of compromises, sure, but it's really cool to see there be a genuine attempt at making these games accessible on a console that required a bit more effort than anything else. And screen crunch aside, I'd say they all did as well a job as they possibly could have. The Sega Smash Pack, Arcade Gallery, and Phantasy Star Collection all feature very interesting changes in order to make the represented titles work well on the console, and if you're curious, I'd say they're worth a view for that alone. They're pointless these days, but cool to look at nevertheless, and are pretty good. Anyway, as I was saying earlier, the Genesis collection was soon outclassed by another compilation developed by Backbone Entertainment, a new merged company consisting of Digital Eclipse once again, and another development company called Imagine Engine. This compilation is Sonic's Ultimate Genesis collection, and Ultimate is right. This game is the reason I didn't spend much time on the Genesis collection for the PS2, because with the exception of Echo Jr., every single game from it is back with even more titles. Matter of fact, if we were to include all the unlockables here, the grand total goes up to 49 games.
Dude. And again, unlockable games are a great thing to include in these collections. The same interviews from the previous collection are back, and the same additional information from each game is here as well, but this time it's all presented on a much cleaner interface. Not only is UGC on an HD console this time around, but the way it's laid out and designed is not only more interesting, but easier on the eyes. I especially love the video previews being on Genesis cartridges, and more arcadey titles having the high score right there next to the list of games. I thought that was a nice touch. With unlockables, bios on the titles, fun trivia, and developer interviews all packed with a long list of games, this collection should be the best of the best, but there's just one problem. The game's picture quality. Again! Seriously, this is what I believe to be Digital Eclipse and Backbone's biggest weakness, and it's especially disappointing here given the fact that this is the first collection made exclusively for the HD consoles. It's really noticeable this time around how fuzzy and soft the games look as opposed to how I want them to be, that being sharp and defined. And to make matters worse, this collection forces these ugly borders and wallpapers for every game unless you opt to stretch them out, but don't do that, please. With all of this in mind, I don't regret the hundreds of hours I spent on release and will always have a soft spot for it introducing me to many of my now favorite Genesis games, but I think that at this point there are far better options, and I hope so anyway, given how many options there are. Seriously, I don't know if you've noticed, but there are a hell of a lot of Genesis-centric collections. So it was back on the CD, the Saturn, the Dreamcast, the 6th generation, and so far as we've been progressing through the 7th. I don't mean to give the Genesis too much attention, but there's been a severe lack of compilations that focus on other consoles. In fact, if there were any re-releases of titles from Sega's other systems, they were either solo or included in other games, which all go beyond the scope of this particular video. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. After all, we're now at the point in time where digital gaming was on the uprise, meaning solo releases of titles were a lot more common. However, the Dreamcast was getting a decent amount of love with re-releases of Sonic Adventure, Space Channel 5 Part 2, Crazy Taxi, and Sega Bass Fishing all getting released not just in digital format, but on a Dreamcast collection disc, which does count for this video, so cool. The collection itself is very minimal on the effort side of things, but the emulation quality for these games is excellent, with Crazy Taxi and Space Channel 5 Part 2 even being in widescreen. Unfortunately, the version of Crazy Taxi you'll get in this collection, visual updates aside, is one of the worst versions of it for one reason in particular: the music. When you think of Crazy Taxi, you think of the absolutely iconic, blood-pumping, hype as hell Offspring soundtrack that not only sounds incredible, but reinforces the chaotic nature of the game as a whole. A literal match made in heaven, but here you get generic, boring, uninspired rock music that sounds okay, I guess. It just hurts knowing what isn't there. Maybe you won't mind if you weren't aware of the original release's soundtrack, but come on. Come on. Other than this, non-Genesis re-releases, again, tended to be solo rather than a part of a large collection, as evident by Jet Set Radio, Knights, and Guardian Heroes amongst other things. Soon enough, even Genesis and pre-Genesis titles followed suit, most of which going under the Sega Vintage Collection moniker. These were released in a spread-out fashion, meaning some do predate the Ultimate Genesis Collection for those trying to keep up with the timeline, but a few were released around or after the day UGC was released as well, so I just decided to talk about them here. Anyway, the Vintage Collections were developed by Backbone once again, and they're fine. The UI was pretty basic, and the quality of the games being emulated was as good or bad as they were in the UGC. I don't care for it personally, but you might. I must not have been the only one who felt this way though, because this would be Backbone's final contribution to Sega's legacy content releases. Yeah, that was it. Backbone's gone. Not to say this was the end of Sega's re-releases, far from it, because after this we were given another collection split up into multiple volumes called the Sega Genesis Classics, developed by D3T Ltd. While the Steam version's grand total of 5 volumes were released over the course of 2010 to 2012, the console version wasn't released until 2018 for whatever reason, but whether you got it back when it was originally coming out, on console later, or during one of Steam's many sales, the collection as a whole is pretty damn impressive. I personally have the Steam version, and I hope you got it before Sonic Origins came out, because if you did, this collection will also include Sonic 1, 2, and 3K. Remember, this was during the time where Sonic 3 and Knuckles was in legal hell, so having that game re-released was a pretty big sell. The console versions didn't even include it, so the Steam version had an advantage at first, but now that Sonic Origins is out, you can no longer purchase this collection with the classic Sonic trilogy on Steam, meaning the console versions now have an advantage since they at least include Sonic 1 and 2. Although the console versions don't have the Echo games or Eternal Champions, so, you know, take that as you will. Real talk, this was always a frustrating decision on Sega's end, but that aside, you do have 3D Blast and Spinball guaranteed along with over 40 other games, making for a very satisfying, well-rounded selection. How they're all presented to you is very unique as well. The HUD is a virtual simulation of a 90s kid's bedroom, with their bed on one side, posters on the wall, and a window to peek outside, the time of day being able to be changed or accurately reflect the time of wherever you are. I adore this interface. It's super immersive, and I especially love playing games while looking at the CRT model. Combine this with the scan lines and bilinear filter, you can have a vibe unlike any other collection to date, and it's magically engaging. This is such a creative way to present the collection, and gives this game a unique atmosphere I've never experienced before. And with this game's VR support, I can only imagine how much cooler it is with a proper headset. All of this wouldn't be possible if the visuals didn't have as many customization options as they did, and I've got nothing to complain about here. Whether I want to replicate the old CRT aesthetic or have sharp pixels, I'm satisfied either way. Different games do have aspect ratios that aren't properly conveyed one-to-one, but many general audience members, myself included, are sure to be satisfied here. I've used this collection for footage on these games a ton in past videos, and I've been very pleased with how they all look, and if you weren't already aware at this point in the video, you should have an idea of how picky I am with my picture quality. As for extra features, well, this is what I consider to be the collection's weakest area. There are some challenges to go for, and even a mirror mode, which is interesting, I guess. I suppose due to this collection's excellent mod support that can more or less make up for it all, but not only is that something exclusive to the Steam version, but I would have liked more in-game, like, say, unlockable content or extra information on the titles presented. Why can't I read the manuals or these comics laying on the ground? Those would have gone perfectly with the whole bedroom aesthetic. I see a music player right there. Why can't I listen to the game's soundtracks? Or heck, let me switch the CRT to watch some of the game's advertisements. I don't need these specifically, but, you know, I would have liked something. And while we're on negatives, I do notice some sound discrepancies here and there within the games. Sound effects are a little off from how they're supposed to be, but more importantly, I tend to hear this crackling sound a fair amount when playing a select few of these games. Since we're bringing up Phantasy Star so much, it is especially noticeable there, which is a bummer, but regardless, all of that being said, it's accessible, it's big, it's competently made, and it'll last you a while. The Sega Genesis Classics collection is some good stuff indeed. But it can't be beat because when the world needed the most, they returned. M2 is back, baby. Rebooting the Sega Vintage re-releases, and they're all excellent. This would end up being a bit of a turning point with Sega's re-releases because as you saw in the 2500 series, they're easily the best at handling classic games being preserved in the best way possible, which continued to be the case here. The visuals, once again, are spot on, with tons of customizability so that you can make every title look exactly how you want. Emulation is great, everything sounds perfect or close enough that I can't tell a difference, and there are some neat bells and whistles within every vintage release, including a sound test and digital manual that, while not physical, is way better than nothing. This collection actually introduced me to Super Hang-On, and that game rules! The only problem I have is that the games all let you set these neat wallpapers to accompany the game feed, but no option for true black borders, which does tend to be my preference. That's seriously it though. M2 just can't be beat, man, and in fact, they continue to handle Sega's re-releases on the 3DS with the 3D Classics lineup. We only got one collective volume while Japan got a bunch more, but most of the games that didn't make the Volume 1 cut are still available separately on the 3DS eShop, so that means they'll be able to be purchased forever. Oh wait. While we have a pretty solid lineup, I'll always be a bit bitter at the 3D Classic releases that never made it overseas, because the games we did get were handled with such finesse on Nintendo's stereoscopic handheld. These 3D Classics, to put it bluntly, look absolutely breathtaking on the 3DS screen, especially if you turn the 3D on. It's impossible to replicate this on your screen right now, but much like the trailer states, you have to see it to believe it. I was blown away playing them myself, meaning yet another dub for M2. With them at the helm of major re-releases and the Sega Genesis Classics satiating anyone else's desires through Steam and once again on consoles in 2018, it was looking good for Genesis fans. So naturally, you've got to give them more, right? We'll talk about this later. It's not like what we're getting wasn't cool, but this is a lot, isn't it? Anyway, mini consoles were becoming pretty popular after the success of the NES and SNES Mini, so Sega had to jump on that train too, and what better developer to handle the games on them than M2? Enter the Sega Genesis Mini, yet another Genesis collection, but one of the better ones for damn sure. It's the first one that makes up its own piece of hardware, and even though it's literally called a mini console, I was still surprised at how tiny it really is. Yeah, I actually own one of these, bought it fairly recently as a matter of fact. It cost me a pretty penny, but you know what? I don't regret my my purchase thanks to the, once again, incredible job done by M2. Every game looks, sounds, and plays nearly identical to what you'd expect from original hardware, making for some of the best results out of any mini console. The controller feels great, the console itself responds fast to my inputs, and there are a good chunk of titles never before re-released in a collection like this. Rare, important games like the Wily Wars, Castlevania Bloodlines, Monster World 4, and the insanely rare Genesis Tetris are all here, and it feels unreal to play these. I've actually never played any of them, but thanks to the Genesis Mini, I can now say that I've played all 4 and had a great time in each one. You can even switch the console's language, and if you switch it over to Japanese, you'll be able to play Fantasy Zone 2, and Robotnik's Mean Bean Machine turns into Puyo Puyo. That's so cool, man. Just be careful and know how to navigate the Japanese menus in order to switch it back to your native language. My main gripe with this is, again, the lack of extra features. See, I told you these got more rare as the years went on. No manuals or extra features of any kind here. It's a bit baffling, especially since M2 is generally pretty good at this sort of thing. I'd like to believe that this is because they were either instructed or concerned with simply making the most faithful emulations of these games, hence why not only are there no extras, but no quality of life improvements to the titles introduced. For those looking for the most faithful incarnations of these titles, this may just be it if you're able to find one. I personally got mine off of eBay if that helps at all. You've even got the option to have black borders. These really are the most faithful re-releases. Regardless of the few complaints I have, I, again, don't regret my purchase. I was just a little shocked to see no substantial features outside of the games advertised. What you see on the back of the box really is it, and I suppose that's fine. Especially because after this, M2 was back on their digital release endeavors with the Sega Ages lineup on the Switch's eShop. These are basically more of their vintage collections, except now on the Switch, meaning more excellent renditions of classic games that you could also play on the go, in my opinion, even better than the vintage line. Despite the similar looking menus in contrast to the unique ones of the vintage collections, everything else is a direct upgrade in my eyes. In fact, I've bought almost all of these and don't regret a single purchase because regardless of how I may feel about one or two of the actual titles, they're handled with such care and respect that it still feels like money well spent. Thankfully, a good amount of them are actually non-Genesis this time around, like Puyo Puyo, Outrun, and the original Phantasy Star. This is how I played that game as a matter of fact, and is how I'll continue to replay it in the years to come. The quality of life features here, such as the map making, experience boost, and bumped up walking speed are unreal. Hell, the quality of life in all of these Ages releases are excellent on top of the actual games being presented in a phenomenal fashion. Even Sonic 1 and 2, despite their billions of re-releases, really stand out in the Sega Ages lineup. The former for including the Spin Dash, Drop Dash, and arcade version of Sonic 1, which I've never played before until now, and the latter for adding the Drop Dash, including a mode that lets you go super from the get-go, throwing in Knuckles for good measure, and adding HD Rumble. You whip out a Spin Dash and you feel it. It is so satisfying, and for such a small feature, really makes the game so much more enjoyable than you think. There were also a few level design tweaks I noticed to lessen the occasional BS in these games, making for stellar options for those looking to try out these incredible games. Every release has the option to play the selected game as originally intended or with quality of life improvements. There's a sound test, button mapping, a few of the games let you switch the region if you know any difference you'd prefer, and every game has an in-depth digital manual. For the price these run for, it is highway robbery, and I'd love it if they were all thrown onto a disc or a Switch cartridge for a truly god-tier collection of some kind. Hell, put them on more consoles, Steam too. Non-Switch owners deserve to play these, damn it, they're so good. No black borders option once again though, and I'm not sure why. Literally just don't put anything there, it's anti-work. Cream of the crop, top of the line, M2, they can't be beat. It's so good. It's so good. Which leads us to one final collection, and it's back to putting the blue blur in the spotlight. Yes, it's finally time to talk about Sonic Origins. Been a while since Sonic got a collection, huh? Technically, there was the Sonic Classic Collection for the DS, but I didn't really find that one necessary to talk about since it doesn't do anything too exciting if you were to ask me. It's fine if you want to play these games on the go, but nothing special. Sonic Origins, on the other hand, features the long-awaited arrival of the Taxman and Stealth versions of Sonic 1, 2, and CD, making their way to modern consoles, as well as the first official HD re-release of Sonic 3 and Knuckles, and the first re-release of that game in literal years. That alone had me incredibly excited because that's my favorite game in the series and one of my all-time favorites. Not to mention it was having extra features aplenty properly advertised prior to release, such as concept art and music from throughout this era of the series, a mission mode, and little animations to help bridge the gap between the games featured. This had all of the elements to make for undoubtedly the best collection this series has ever seen, and the end result is pretty good. Really good. I love this thing. I've tried to understand so many people's loud complaints over the package and how disappointing it is, but I don't know, man. This thing's kind of great. I do think that the original versions of these games and Sonic 1 and 2's Ages ports are the better looking options, but just because these aren't the best doesn't mean they aren't good. They look great. It's like right below M2's work, but far beyond any other re-release these games have gotten, including the prior praised Genesis Classics and Mega Collections. Coupled with proper widescreen and a smoother 60 FPS with proper sprite rotation and other little graphical updates, I'd say the Origins versions of these games rest on that higher tier of visual fidelity in their own ways. Although I've got to be honest, a part of me does prefer playing these games in 4x3, but hey, this game does allow for that. You know, just with a border you can't turn off and not exactly being the original version, but just the remastered edition chopped into 4x3, but hey, options, right? Yeah, this is probably my least favorite part of the collection, along with the inconsistent and way too low sound mixing, but I wouldn't call those too big a deal, meaning that while I did face my fair share of glitches primarily in 3K, nothing ever made this game unplayable in any sense, and the worst I had to do was back out of a game within the collection and re-enter it. Not to say the glitches and issues a decent amount of people ran into don't exist, but I kind of feel like these were experienced by the vocal minority and blown slightly out of proportion. Your mileage may vary, so again, I highly encourage you not to let some strangers on the internet tell you what to do, but to come to your own conclusions on top of taking other opinions into consideration. Patches are a thing that can and probably will happen, and all of these games still play great and have all these excellent additions Taxman and Stealth threw in to make for an even better experience than these fantastic games already provided. All 4 entries have the drop dash, Sonic 1 has the spin dash and Supersonic, Sonic 2 got Hidden Palace fully integrated, and CD lets you toggle between both soundtracks whenever you want on top of many other additions to all these games. As for Sonic 3K, I mean, there are a lot of small additions and tweaks that made me smile, but this is mostly the same, just polished a bit more to make the best Sonic game even better. On top of the games featured here, the extras are also fantastic, reaching the heights of something like Mega and Gems Collection if you were to ask me. Some of the missions are pretty dumb, but a lot of them are a good amount of fun and over before you know it. Not to mention the entirety of Sonic Mania Adventures is included, which gave me the same level of surprise and satisfaction as having those comics to read back in the Mega Collection. The map is charming, I love the interface for how clean and fun it all looks, and those animations are so damn good. Love these little cartoons, and I'm glad to have so many in this collection. I may lose credibility for saying this, but I don't care. I liked Sonic Origins, loved it even. Give it a patch or two to iron out its glitches and brush up the visuals a bit more, and it'll easily be Sonic's best collection, and I mean that with my full chest. Whew, it's been a journey and a half, but those were, at the very least, all of the major Sega Legacy compilations, collections, re-releases, whatever you want to call them. Quite the list, wouldn't you say? And quite the range of quality at that. You've hopefully gotten a good idea of what you want to dive into, but for those who are patiently waiting for my recommendations, let me give you the lowdown. In terms of Sega's Genesis collections, I think the Genesis Classics available on Steam and modern consoles is without a doubt the way to go. The price is great, and I love the way the games all look, as well as the bedroom HUD that accompanies them. That being said, any game that has gotten the M2 treatment, whether that be through the Sega Ages, Vintage Collection, or 3D Classics lineup, those are each game's best version. M2 is the king of legacy content, and these are prime examples of that. Every game has some kind of neat addition or quality of life improvement to streamline the experience, or if you want, you can play every game as originally intended as well, and it's all presented so clean. I can't sing that company's praises enough, just so good. For all non-Genesis desires, unfortunately your options are a bit limited, but the re-releases seen on Steam and the few that even got the M2 Sega Ages treatment are the way to go. I'd say there's a satisfying amount of ways to play various arcade titles for those who want to experience them, with the same debatably being able to be said about the Dreamcast. Crazy Taxi especially is great to get off of Steam, since you can be like me and mod out the lame royalty-free music in favor of the original Offspring soundtrack in order to give this game the energy and vibe it was always meant to have. As for the Sega Saturn, I don't know what to tell you, even I'm having a hard time with that one. There are a few games that got digital re-releases of some kind, but they're very few and far between, so get what you can and cross your fingers with me that more of these can see the light of day. Finally, for those looking for the best Sonic collection, if you have access to a Saturn or a way to play through the library reliably, Sonic Jam is pretty damn good, but otherwise, just get Sonic Origins. It's good, guys, I swear. Most of the problems we have with it will no doubt be patched out in due time. All of the major classic Sonic games are in widescreen or 4x3. There are extras aplenty and a ton of exclusive content for Origins specifically. It's good, damn it, good! As for my final point of this video journey thingy, there's the future to take into consideration. We're on the horizon of the Sega Genesis Mini 2, and that's somewhat exciting, but as we've seen in this very video, we are more than good on Genesis re-releases of any kind at this point. There are so many titles on other consoles that haven't seen re-releases of any kind or are begging for another chance in the spotlight, and with a team like M2 down for the cause, it is high time to figure out how to get those titles on modern hardware. I hope that in the coming years we see more from the likes of the Dreamcast, arcades, and especially the Saturn, with an emphasis on the truly hard to access titles. Figure out those consoles behind the scenes tech shenanigans. We can wait. We no doubt have plenty to chew on in the meantime. Then there's Sonic. With Origins, I'd also say that we're officially good on this 2D content, and we have more than enough ways to play these games as well. I much prefer classic Sonic titles to the 3D ones, but those fans deserve some love too. A Sonic 3D All-Stars of some kind is long overdue, as well as making these games more accessible beyond the decent amount of Steam releases and Xbox backwards compatibility. Whether all of these suggestions are under a new Sega Ages lineup, a mini console, or whatever, I'd love to see a real effort to get new names a chance to shine, and I'm sure many others feel the same. We've seen time and time again many companies expressing interest in doing just that, so for now, only time will truly tell, but until that day comes, I and many other Sega fans will be patiently waiting for even more windows into the company's past to open up. The view's already beautiful, so why not show me more? Thank you for watching this much longer than originally intended video. If you liked it, please be sure to give it a like to help me win against the algorithm and make it feel like it was all actually worth it. While you're down there, you might as well subscribe for more Sega related content among other things. The button is right there after all, next to the bell as a matter of fact, that you should also click so that you can be notified whenever I drop another banger. Thank you as always to Neo and Soul for the thumbnail art and graphic design respectfully, with links to their Twitter accounts in the description so that you can maybe commission them yourself. Special shoutouts to the Patreon members to help me monetarily, such as my $10 Mystic artists, Capone Arter Lane, Kiara Loveday, Mecha Saltman, and Neolab, and of course, much love and a kiss on the cheek to all my bass and burst artists listed here. Thank you once again for just watching the video, always to support me beyond subscribing are linked in the description, along with all music and footage credits, and so long as you stay hydrated, I'll see you in whatever we do next.